I'm big into traditional harmonica playing. I like a lot of the 20s and 30s stuff, and I play some Memphis Jug Band stuff and Gus Cannon stuff in my band. Some of the players that I think of are people like Noah Lewis and Will Shade. Who were the other traditional harmonica players from that period that you would recommend listening to?
Well, any of the rural players are the ones that I'm the most fired up about. The jug band guys, that's already like jug band stuff is already an urban tradition. Of course, southern urban cities, certainly Will Shade and Noah Lewis together cover a lot of turf. I'd like to also say that the way that Jed Davenport played is quite noteworthy. He had some real attitude in his playing, some real orneriness in his playing. And those guys, I sort of feel like that approach, if it didn't turn into old time music, I suspect that it sort of was an influence on John Lee Williamson, Sonny Boy Number One, who everybody that I know that's into blues history in a scholarly way agrees, and I agree, that his approach to playing really is the foundation for the Chicago blues. That whole approach, Little Walter, Big Walter, so on and so on.
Sure. And what for you makes a good traditional, what you would call a traditional harmonica player?
Very good question. Very glad you asked. To me, they take advantage of the 5 types of sound that the harmonica makes. Even back then, there were northern urban players like Robert Cooksey, whose approach to playing is very single note, clean, melodic. And that somehow seems to be most associated with northern players from the north, more urban stuff, more urban players. But the southern players, the rural players, the traditional players, that wouldn't cut it, because they probably didn't have electricity or seldom had it, so they had to generate more sound and a bigger sound without any kind of amplification whatsoever. They were poorer, so the instruments very often were handmade. So to answer the question, the 5 types of sound, the clean melody is very obvious, and that seems to be what the majority of contemporary players focus on. But you also have to take into consideration these other sound types, which are the splits, octaves, intervals, what I call dirty notes. You hear that very, very much amongst players that develop their sound and style before electricity, before amplification. And then that percussive, crunching, vamping, slapping sound, which Sonny Boy One seems to really have made it an essential ingredient in Chicago blues. So it's those sounds that really together add up into a lot of sound, a big sound. And I think that that's very important, because I try to make no bones about it when I'm teaching that the harmonica is a small instrument, and that's what it does. It sounds small. So if you're not mindful of these other things, you're not going to get much sound out of it. Your screen is shut off.
That's fine, yeah, it does that. It's still running, we can keep going. We just don't have to see ourselves anymore.
The only other thing I'd like to add to the traditional players is the unaccompanied solo players, stuff that D. Ford Bailey did, for example. He was one of the best, most well-known. and the stuff that Sonny Terry did.
Sure.
You know, of course, he's connected with Brownie McGee, but he didn't really need to have a band or an accompanist to play. He could bring an audience to a boil all by himself with the energy he created with the harmonica. And, you know, going back and looking at the harmonica as more than just a melody instrument, I think is really key. Otherwise, you can really be confused trying to make sense out of it.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, after all, they call it a harmonica. If it was intended to be just a melody instrument, they probably would have called it a melodica.
Yeah.